Welcome, everybody, to our draft day series, Path to the Draft. Matt Laguza and Cole Noble here. We are going to be going through a series of different videos over the next few weeks heading up to the draft, planning on 2 videos a week, uh, going through different positions, our mock drafts, et cetera, et cetera. We're excited to go through it, and today we're starting off with the All-Star games from this past week. So, Cole, good to be here.
Yep, glad to be here. It's always an exciting time of year. One of my favorite times of year is when, the football action stops and it's all the drama leading into the next start of football action. So, yeah, it was a great week. A lot of good prospects coming into the draft this year.
Exactly. And that was pretty much the last time that we're going to see a lot of NFL caliber football for the next few months. So this is the last time we're going to see these guys play until they're in their new uniforms. So obviously you've got the combine coming up in the pro days, but this is the last time we see them with pads. So this is really the last chance for scouts, GMs, coaches to really see what they can do on the football field. And we're going to start off. We're going to go all-star game by all-star game. Start off with the Shrine Bowl, then move into the Senior Bowl, just with some of our uh, most notable risers and our most notable fallers from these bowl games. So we'll start off with the Shrine Bowl, as I mentioned. Um, my first guy, for me, he's not really too much of a riser just because I already had him pretty high up in his position group, but that's Kyle McCord, quarterback for Syracuse. He had a great final season here after transferring out of Ohio State, and he was named the practice quarterback of the week for the Shrine Bowl before pulling out of the actual game. Uh, for me personally, I think he just, you know, uh, really performed exactly how I would have predicted him to perform in practices. He was able to hit the sideline balls. He was really dominant over the middle. He was driving the football, and he just showed his pro level understanding of the game, in my opinion. I think that's what stands out to me the most is with a lot of these guys, some of them in this class, these quarterbacks, some of them have a lot of flashy abilities. Some of them are just extremely accurate. Where I feel like Kyle McCord, he just looks like a pro when he's out there on the field. So he's the first of my guys that I think were a big riser for the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback position's a tough one in general this year. So, whatever these guys can do to stand out, they're going to have to do it. I mean, during the season, McCord led the nation in passing yards. And, that's usually not a good testament of, what they're going to turn into. I mean, Michael Penix led it last year, but he still got in being a first round pick. Went top 10 to the Falcons. So we'll see, what he can do in a couple of years. And McCord's going to be the same way. He's not going to be a guy that's going to come in and start for a team, but definitely, the scouts and, different front office executives in attendance there are going to see a guy that's going to be fun to develop for one team that wants to take the flyer on him.
Yeah, I think that's a big that's a big thing that we're going to be talking about a lot over the next few weeks with these quarterbacks. Is there's a lot of teams are unsure about a lot of the guys. So we could see a guy that goes a lot later than people expect. We could see a guy that goes a lot earlier than people expect, just because I think a lot of teams are going to have very different views on who's the best quarterback. So that's something to take a look at. My first faller is also at the quarterback position. Um, and it was a little tough because I feel like a lot of these other guys were kind of hit or miss for most of the week. But for me, it's Ethan Garbers out of UCLA. Again, this is a position where you can easily move up the board quickly, and Garbers did nothing to improve his stock. I feel like with Brady Cook, he played decent in the game. With Max Brosmer, he played decent in the practices despite having a bad game. Same with Cam Miller. Decent game, good practice. Where Ethan Garbers, I just didn't think he played well all week. And in this kind of position where really from quarterback 5 through 12 can flip flop pretty easily, Ethan Garbers did himself no favors, and he's going to be sitting towards the bottom end, probably going to be at UDFA.
Yeah, and I mean that's with this event, a lot of what you're looking at is these late round guys. So I could definitely see that there with Garber, and what he's got going on after this week. But again, I mean these quarterbacks, it's going to be really tough to see where these guys come off the board, especially some of these later guys. And the ones that were there this year, just in my opinion, weren't the best. And we saw even, at the Senior Bowl as well. I mean, Jackson Dart, everyone liked what he saw, but, it's even hard to even position where he's going to be at. Some people have him as QB1. Some people still say second round grade on him. And it's so flip-flop with this, position going into it this year. And it's the most important position in football. And you just aren't really sure what, you're expecting to see out of the class coming in right now.
Yeah. So let's move away from the quarterback position until we get to the Senior Bowl here. One guy that we didn't get to see a lot during the week, we also didn't really get to see a lot of him during the season because he only played one game, and that's Corey Croskett Merritt out of Arizona. He only played one game for Arizona, but he came out and absolutely dominated. 96 yards, 2 touchdowns. He showed his ability to get outside, beat the edge, and he's just got elite acceleration, elite agility. And he also showed a little bit of power there in some goal line situations, being able to power through, get into the end zone. He's a guy, I think one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, everybody's been talking about is how deep this running back class is. And he's going to be a guy that you're going to be looking at as potentially probably 5th to 7th round guy that ends up potentially making a difference at the next level because he looks like he could be a potentially 3 down back.
Yeah, I mean, another back that I want to throw out there is, Taj Brooks as well. I thought he had a strong week. What he was able to do, and show off. I mean, the guy's 230 pounds at running back. I mean, he's a bulldozer. And he showed that this week. And but I mean, his agility too. Patience, all the things he was able to show this week. Tej Brooks, and going in. For fantasy, running backs as rookies, he's the guy that can sneak into potentially the back end of, the second round into the third round, at the earliest. So I think he had a really good week too at running back.
100%. Next up, we've got one guy that I'm actually very high on, Holland Pierce out of Rutgers at offensive tackle. He's an
Mm,
absolute mammoth of an offensive tackle. And I think what we saw, at least in the one-on-ones early in the week, is he was able to really hold his own against some of the better edge rushers of the week. When we're looking at Tyler Betty, when we're looking at Elijah Roberts, who's also on my list here as a big standout. And one thing that I think he struggled with a little bit, which you kind of expect with a guy of his size, is the quick edge rushers, the speed guys. But he showed that he was able to stop him a few times, and I think he's a guy that in an offensive tackle class, which is very top heavy, you got the first 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys that are really solid, and then there's a pretty steep drop off, in my opinion, in the talent. He's a guy that's probably in that range that I think really raised his stock and could end up being a pretty early day 2 pick, depending on how many guys go in the first round. But he's a guy, he's all potential. If you can clean him up technically a little bit, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a career all pro left tackle. So really
yeah.
props.
And I mean, once we get around the combine time too, I mean, this guy had the longest arms and wingspan
Yeah,
out of anyone at the Shrine Bowl. And, they're going to love that once we get combine time. And that's what you see about these tackles is, all the first round guys this year and every year we talk about it, especially the last, 2 or 3 years is their arm length and their wingspan at tackle and like, oh, this guy should move to guard. This guy should move to, from tackle and play left guard, those kind of things. Holland Pierce isn't that way. I mean, you're sticking him at left tackle. You're going to keep him there. And like you said, it's a lot of potential with this guy and you get the right, offensive line coach or coordinator that works well with that unit, I agree this guy could be a diamond that not a lot of teams are looking at potentially.
yeah, 100%. And to finish off on the offensive side of the ball, for right now, I've got 2 wide receivers that really showed out, especially in practice. They didn't really do too much in the game. Efton Chisholm, the third out of Eastern Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and Juice Wells out of Ole Miss. Um,
As well, that's nice.
I think Efton Chisholm, he was a guy that everybody just loved his route running. He was able to create separation very easily out of the break. And he holds on to the football. I mean, he's just a dog when he gets into some tough situations. And then Juice Wells, he's a guy that I think is going a little bit under the radar just because of how many Ole Miss guys have, such high draft prestige this year on both sides of the football. And when I was watching him in the one-on-ones, at least, I mean, his route running looked crisp. He had good hands. He's speedy. He's got good separation ability. I think he's a guy in, again, another pretty deep wide receiver class. He's probably going to go early day 3, is what I would assume. So he's a guy that I think some teams they're going to get there. they're going to get him, and he could be a really big contributor early on in his NFL career.
And I liked what I saw out of Dante Thornton Jr. as well. A guy who started at, Oregon, transferred to Tennessee. 2023 was a bad year for him, just injuries. But, I mean, he turned it around this year and looked really good this week. I mean, as in terms of the deep ball guys in this class, I mean, this guy's 6'5", 214, and, the deep ball is there. And I always like the guys from Tennessee that, are good on the deep balls.
Yep.
Even though, Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt haven't really turned the corner in their professional careers yet.
Cedric
But
Tillman had some weeks there.
yeah, I had a couple of good games right after they got rid of Amari Cooper. But
Yeah.
yards per catch this year, he led the conference, and also shared the FBS lead with 50 and 50 plus yard catches with six. So deep ball guy, he's there all day long, and had a strong week after having a bad injury year the year before in 2023. Good showing for him this weekend.
100%. Now let's move to the defense of the ball. I mostly have I mean, there are some interesting guys here. Let's start off in the secondary. The guy that everybody's been talking about all week, Kobe Bryant, out of
Yeah.
Texas. I mean, lockdown corner. The man was. I know, we talked about Efton Chisholm, we talked about Thornton, we talked about Juice Wells, but other than those guys and the Colorado guys, there hasn't been much out of the receiver group here in at the Shrine Bowl. But Kobe Bryant stood out. I mean, he was sticky. His good hip rotation. He dominated in one-on-ones. He looked like a guy that could have been and could have dominated at the Senior Bowl, not just the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, and he looked opportunistic as well this week, and that's been, the bulk of his career as well at Kansas. And people are going to knock on him on the size. You always are with the cornerbacks, because, they're going to go against guys they've never seen before in terms of size at the next level. Emmanuel Forbes struggled with it. It seemed like it wouldn't be that big of a deal when he was a first round pick. Come time to play in the NFL, he's now on his second team already and was a healthy scratch toward the end of the year with the Rams. So that's the thing with him. He proved to be a starting caliber NFL cornerback with his size? Because, I mean, he weighed in at he was 5'11", weighed in at, 171 pounds.
Yep.
He's, hopefully by combine, he puts a little bit more size on his frame.
Yeah. And I think that's I think one of the reasons why he's going to be a little bit lower than maybe his talent says. But he definitely raised some eyebrows with this week, and that could end up he's probably not going to be a first rounder like Emmanuel Forbes was, but he could end up going in early day two. And will just all depend on what the risk factor is for some of those teams. Next up, one of my favorite guys, he was an absolute dog in the actual game. Shamari Simmons, safety out of Arizona State. Obviously, he had that controversial targeting call against Texas that ended up getting called back. That's what at least I know him mostly for from the season. But he is just an absolute animal when he's back there in the secondary. He's amazing at identifying the run, getting down to that first level, and just laying a big hit. And I think we saw that early on in the actual game when first he was involved in the stop of Cam Miller when he was trying to get into the end zone on that one play, I believe it was in the first quarter. And then he also got Ja'Cory Crossett-Merritt on the edge, which not many people were able to do throughout the entire game. So he's a guy that I'm looking at as just a big, physical, hard-hitting safety that also looked pretty good in coverage. So he's a guy that I'm really high on. Good size, good ball skills, and just all around just hard hitter.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go, push it out of the secondary and go to the D line. One longer guy I want to throw out there that had a good week that really needed it after his season. But Maryland defensive tackle Jordan Phillips, I thought he looked good this week. Pass protection drills, and run blocking drills, he looked very compact. Rushing in one-on-ones and beating some guys there and just playing his power. And this is a guy that didn't record any sacks during the season, but in terms of what he can do in the run game and being a rotational guy potentially at the next level, I think scouts are probably gonna be impressed what they end up seeing out of him this week compared to going back and checking the tape from the season.
100%. Now there are a few guys that I'm just going to mention because I think we've got a lot to talk about when we get to the Senior Bowl, as I feel like there was a lot of transition up or down. But Caden Prescorn out of Ole Miss, I think a lot of the tight ends did not have a great week outside of Rondé from Syracuse. Shiloh Sanders kind of had an up and down week. I think he's a guy where he didn't perform well in the drills, but looked pretty good in game. So he's a guy that I'm going to say it's a loss this week because he didn't improve his stock. I think
Hmm.
that's the big thing for him. And then finally, just going down Luke Newman and Drew Kendall, two interior offensive linemen, Michigan State and BC, and then two defensive linemen, CJ West, interior out of Indiana. And then I mentioned earlier, Elijah Roberts out of SMU, the edge, probably the best edge rusher from the week.
Yeah, good names throughout there. I mean, a lot to keep in mind here.
100%. So now let's move in. Cole's going to take the lead here on the Senior Bowl. There's a lot to go through, a lot of people, at least from what I'm seeing, thrown out there, a lot of differing opinions. Some people love a guy, some people don't like a guy. And, I'll let you take the lead here and go for it. What did you see? What do you think? But I feel like there's a lot of controversy about a lot of these guys.
I mean, if we're starting with controversy, I've already mentioned them, but we got to start with Jackson Dart. I mean, I don't have never seen the, community be more split. I mean, has been a war all
Except for
weekend long
Jalen
on Twitter.
Milrow as well.
Yeah. I mean, with the Jackson Dart discourse has gone insane. I mean, the QB1, some people are calling him not even a first round guy. I mean, this is back, to the Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis year. I will still go on record that I really loved Malik Willis and really thought he should have been a first round guy. But situations obviously matter. He looked great with Matt LaFleur this year. Just to throw that out there. But the Jackson Dart discourse this weekend, I mean, he looked good. And it's just he's going to be the guy that you are going to cherry pick every single thing that he does and try to knock him or rise him down. And it was a war. I mean, an absolute war of how people were evaluating him this week. I liked what I saw personally.
No, I love Jackson Dart. Right now, he's my QB2 on my board at this moment. And I think I'm kind of in the middle on his Senior Bowl performance, as I think some people are saying, oh, he jumped up boards, he had a great performance, um, you know, he's going to really move up. And some people said, he did absolutely nothing. He didn't look good. For me, I just don't think he did anything too positive or anything too negative. He just kind
Mm.
of he showed his ability to go across the middle. He showed his ability to place the ball. He showed his ability to be mobile, but he was also a little bit inconsistent with ball placement. I mean, we saw he probably should have let Jack Betch a little bit more on that seam ball up the middle in the game. We saw a few times where he probably could have driven the ball a little bit better instead of just throwing it with a little bit of touch. Um, so again, as I said, I'm really high on him. I think he's probably not a guy that's going to start right out the gate if you draft him because he has a little bit to clean up technically and on the mental processing side of the game. But I mean, I mean, we saw it on that throw in the bowl game against Duke. I mean, he's got all the arm talent in the world and smart guy. I'm really high on him, but I would have liked to see him do a little bit more this week, just a little bit more.
Someone I didn't want to see more of was Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you have to see a guy throw an incomplete pass that, just you put the right touch on and it's there? He did not separate himself at all. I wasn't impressed even during the season of what he showed. And he's definitely like the epitome of a developmental guy you're betting on, the talent and I mean the athletic talent, because the arm talent and the touch and the accuracy was not good during the game, was not good during practice. I mean, he was probably one of the biggest losers all week long based on the top name value guys at the Senior Bowl this year.
No question. I mean, I'm a guy that has not liked him for a long time. I think that's mostly just because of the hype that he gets. Everybody's saying, "Oh, he's a first round guy. He's QB3." He's not.
Mhm.
I think he has a ton of potential. He's got good size. He's got a good arm. And he's obviously an elite athlete. But from what I saw over the entire season, is the inability to hit anything past 10 yards down the field consistently. Um, I mean, there were so many times where he was bailed out by his receivers on bad throws. But personally, I just wouldn't take him before round three. I think he's got the potential, and if you get him in the right system with a good development team, he could potentially succeed. I mean, we've seen it. Jalen Hurts uh, is a very similar guy. I think Jalen was a little bit more technically sound in the passing game than
for
Milrow is,
sure.
but a very similar player. Where I think if he gets into that kind of system or a Buffalo Bills type system, with how Josh Allen plays the game this past season, he could potentially succeed. But it's a flyer. It is just pure potential, and you need to have the right system in place and the right development team in place. So he definitely if anything, he plummeted down my board. He was my
Yeah.
QB 6, I think, and he's probably close to 7 or 8 at this point.
But I mean, there's still, a lot to like about him with his size,
Yeah.
his rushing ability as well. Someone's gonna get him and, take the flyer on him. And, it's a key thing to have. I mean, you're going up a team, if you're in the AFC East, they got Joe Milton there in New England for a big arm guy that, you can have him in practice to going against your defense to simulate a Josh Allen. Someone like that where he's a big style quarterback, you can go against him. That's kind of, Milrow at the time being early in his career is going to be that kind of style of guy where he's going to be a guy you use in practice to simulate other players and see if you have, something that you can bring out of him to make him a better quarterback
I'll
at the
tell
end
you,
of the
if history repeats itself, he is a Raider. He is a first rounder.
day.
He is going at number 6 or whatever I think it's 6 that they have. He's
Pete
going.
Carroll, come get your guy.
Pete Carroll's going to go and get him. And he's either going to be really bad or he's going to do something really bad. But but no, I think he'd be a decent pick in the third or fourth round. But the first round hype is crazy right now.
Yeah. And there's a lot of hype elsewhere outside the quarterback position. I mean, two wide receivers really stood out, and are getting crazy comps right now. Jack Beck out of TCU, he's the Puka Nakua this year, apparently. That's already been floating around a lot. And then Tez Johnson as well. Essentially the brother of Bo Nix. A lot of people like him coming from Oregon, going back with Bo Nix potentially in Denver, but Tank Dell comps for him because he's weighed in at 156 pounds and played like Tank Dell. But there's a lot of those two comps are like very funny. It's like, yeah, it's the most recent sub 160 wide receiver. Oh, he's Tank Dell. This guy looks like Tank Dell. And then Jack Beck is like, oh, this guy's the next Puka Nakua. No, there's no Puka Nakua before Puka Nakua, and there not won't be one after him. But the comp games are funny on Twitter as well
I,
this weekend.
that's one of the things that I love about this All Star Week is everybody sees these guys for the first time, and the game is one thing, but all these comps are coming out before the game. Like this is like during drill week, and especially for positions like wide receiver where they have a huge advantage in one on ones, is you see them do these amazing things, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh, this guy's the next great thing," and some of them are great. I mean, Jack Betch had a good week. He really did. Is he the next Puka Nakua? Probably not.
I mean,
No.
he's gonna get drafted higher than Nakua,
I
but
mean,
I mean, I don't know
right,
if
he's
he has
gonna
the
get drafted higher.
immediate success Puka did.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I like Jack Betch. I think I two guys that I really like were Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll out of
Yeah, oh,
Iowa
yeah,
State. I really like Jaden Higgins. I think
interesting. I really like Jalen Noel this
yeah, no,
week.
I loved them
Yeah.
both. I mean Jalen Knoll just quick, great crisp route runner. Where Jaden Higgins, I think the reason why I have Jaden Higgins, above Jalen Knoll in my thinking from this past week is because he surprised me. I
Mhm.
think his ability to separate and his ability to, he dominated corners, getting past them on deep balls, coupled with his physicality, was something that I wasn't expecting to see. I feel like for a lot of the film that I watched on him, he was just very physical. Went across the middle of the field and didn't really do much after that. Whereas I felt this week we really got to see technically how good he was in the pre-catch game. And obviously we saw him on the touchdown pass from Ollie Gordon there. Um, he was able to make a really tough catch. So both of those guys had a great week in my opinion.
Yeah, and with Noel too, I just want to throw out there. I like watching guys that are the slot specialists. That's kind of my forte of what I like to watch from the wide receivers.
So
But Tez Johnson looked really good. I mean, that's where he lined up and dominated in college, and he pretty much stayed there all week.
Yep.
this week, but I liked how Jalen Noel he moved around. He looked good on the outside and looked good on the inside, even though he primarily played in the slot in that offense because he had Higgins with him at the same time too at the position. But he was really able to, I think, prove himself and show up by moving outside and still winning some of those tough position battles.
100%. I think I'm very high on this wide receiver class. I think there's a lot of very there are some guys that are going to make the impact at the NFL level. In a top three wide receiver, um, top in a top three as a top three wide receiver in a team, very
Mhm.
early on. So I was really excited. Some guys surprised me, like I said, with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. But this kind of reassured me that there's going to be a lot of receivers available in that day two range. That I think there's going to be a run of them and running backs uh, in that range that could be really big impact performers next season.
Yeah. And on the offensive front, the name everyone talked about all week long was Gray Zabel out of NDSU. NDSU's produced some, solid talent. Cody Mouch really, solidified himself at this event a couple of years ago, ended up being a second round pick out of Tampa. And it looked like Zabel almost put his name in, the running for a first round during the week. He was easily the best player in terms of working in various positions, going against top talent, which is big for, some of these FCS guys is going against top FBS defensive lineman for the first time. But he was able to prove himself this week. And then once the game came around, it was a little bit, shaky at times for him in
Yep.
pass protection. So that might knock him back into the early second round. But I mean, overall, this guy impressed a lot of people this week.
I was gonna say a lot of the discord from this past week was about where he's gonna play. I think at this point, obviously, we know it's gonna be interior. Uh,
Yeah.
it they had him play there all week. I don't even think he played a single snap outside, if I remember correctly, in 1v1s. But where do you see him? Do you think he's a guard, or do you think he could make that transition to center? Because it looked like he was playing a lot more center later in the actual game than I was expecting.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's where a lot of people might actually have him play, which surprised me a little bit.
I mean, I think if he fully goes to center, it makes that decision between now and April, he probably could be the top center off the board.
Yep.
And positional value, if that's what he wants, is to be the top guy at his position. Playing center is best suited for him. And like you said, yeah, a lot of scouts liked him there, especially toward the end of the week. That's really where you started seeing him work at because that's what they were wanting to see out of him. Um, so yeah, I would probably stick him there and keep him at center.
Awesome.
Let's see. I had another one on here. Who else impressed you this week?
For
Anyone on
me,
the offensive line?
uh, on the offensive line, I honestly didn't see too much that really changed my opinions on them. I think Connerly looked much better at left tackle than he was at right tackle, which I think we pretty much all expected. Willie Lampkin, for his size, impressed
Yes,
me.
dude. He
Center.
was on my list. I was about to get him doing
I
next. I
mean,
love Willie Lampkin.
5'10", he's a dog there. So I really enjoyed him there. And then outside of the offensive line, I think a lot of the running backs showed out. Woody Marks was good. I love Devin Neal. He's really high on my board. Ollie Gordon kind of proved to everybody that, he's the same guy as 2 years ago. He can be a baller at the running back position. Uh, but yeah, no, that's what I have on offense. I think everybody else has been hit.
hmm And then defensively, I mean, the conversation started and ended with Mike Green. He made himself a lot of money this week. He's easily going to have his name somewhere in the top half of the first round, I think. At the time, even going into the process, it looked like he was going to be in the 20s. I think he could end up in the teens after what he did this week.
Yeah, 100%. He's a guy where I think there's going to be a lot of shifting of the edge rushers over the next few months. I think we're going to see a lot of measurements come in at the combine. We're going to see just some physical times that come in, and there's going to be a lot of shifting around of some of those players. Mike Green obviously dominated. He's arguably the best technical edge rusher in this draft, in my opinion. So as long as obviously there's been a lot of talk about is his arm length long enough? I think if it comes in a good length at the combine, he could be a guy that ends up going top 15, even top 10 potentially, depending on positional need there. But he really was great. And Donovan, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name right now because I don't have it written there. Out of Boston College, he really impressed me as well
Oh, yes.
as a guy
Yeah.
that could be a even top 20 guy potentially.
Hmm.
But I think he kind of solidified himself as a first rounder. If the amount of edge rushers that we expect to go in the first round.
Yeah, and that you were saying, another position I want to talk about is tight end, that I think
Oh
impressed
yeah,
me this week.
yep.
Just, to wrap it up there. But you said, the tight ends at the Shrine Bowl weren't the best. The tight ends at the Senior Bowl,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, that they had all the big names there, that you would expect to see, going crazy at this event. I mean, Mason Taylor looked really good. But I like some of the younger guys you'll get later in, or not the younger guys, but guys you'll get later in the draft. Jackson Halls, the Thomas Fadones, those two guys looked really good this week in terms of pass protection and blocking, and then what they're able to show, running routes and catching the ball as well. The tight ends really looked good this week.
I was gonna say the tight ends looked outstanding. I mean, obviously Elijah Arroyo and Mason Taylor were probably the two biggest risers from this week.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, they just showed elite athleticism. I'm really high on Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. I think he looked pretty good. And then Jake Brenningstool, I heard got a lot of hype um, after his day two performance, I believe it was. But he's another guy. The tight end position really is stacked this year. Um, and we could see a lot of them go in the first round. I could see I could see four guys potentially going first round at the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, there's even what was his name? The Penn State guy, Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren, yep.
I mean, we didn't even see him this weekend, and he's going to be,
Same with
people are
Colson
having
Loveland.
people are having him as a top 10
Didn't
pick.
see Colson Loveland either, and he's another guy.
Exactly.
Like there could be so many tight ends that go early. Um, we could see it like a fantasy draft this year with just like the tight end run that is coming out. One's going to go off the board, and everybody's just going to start and go and getting them so they can get their guy. Um, but no, the offensive side of the ball was really impressive for me.
Yeah, I mean, the best part about this weekend is you see guys that you normally aren't going to hear.
Yep,
And we definitely saw a lot of guys make the name for themselves. And then now, over the next couple of weeks, we start seeing some of the big dogs once we get closer to the combine that are going to be the top first round guys. But in terms of day two and later rounds, this is a big week for a lot of people, as it always is. Always a fun week.
100%. Now, just some other names that we'll throw out here. You name anybody that you think. Darius Alexander out of Toledo, interior defensive line, I thought had a really good week. Um, Jeffrey Bassa, linebacker out of Oregon. And then uh who else was it? Quincy Riley looked pretty good at corner out of Louisville. And then Billy Bowman, safety out of Oklahoma. Those were and Joshua Farmer out of FSU. I think those guys had, not on the same level as the guys that we've talked about so far, but I think those are guys that kind of solidified themselves as potential day two picks later than probably third or fourth round. I would say a lot of those guys, but those are guys that stood out to me.
Yeah, and Deion Walker,
Deion
Deion
Walker,
Walker, yeah, he had some good this week. I mean, he started the week off strong with his measurables. His performance was pretty satisfactory. But in terms of being a potential first round pick, we'll see how guys view him. But he's another one, fringe first round, early second round guy. The interior of the defensive front as well.
all right. Well, I think that's it that we have here from All Star Week. Obviously we had a lot of risers, and we had a few people that we're a little unsure about after this, but those are going to be a lot of your 20 to 80 guys, 20 to pick 80 guys that you saw this
Yeah.
week. So it'll be exciting to see how the pro days go, how the combine goes, if any of these guys shift any further. But great first episode. Next up, we're going to release the first mock draft. I believe what we're going to do is alternating picks. I
All
believe
right.
we'll talk about it later this week. But I think we're going to do alternating just to make it go a little faster.
Yeah,
But
that's fun.
but yeah, so we will see you later this week. Thanks, Cole.
Yep, appreciate it.